So
This
excited to be
conference will
here with.
now be
Oh.
recorded.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for being here. Very, very excited to be here today with the amazing John Duffy. John, thank you so much for taking the time to join me.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure is all mine. So, as you're aware, this is a brand new podcast, and the entire purpose of this cast is to essentially teach people about endurance and about never giving up. And you are the perfect embodiment of that story. So, one thing that I would absolutely love to know a little bit more about from your perspective is where did you grow up and how did you get your start in Hollywood?
Well, I grew up in the South Bronx. Why I like to say the South Bronx. It's one of the worst neighborhoods in America. Two presidents, President Carter and President Reagan, both visited my neighborhood as an example of urban poverty and urban decay and urban
Wow.
ills, etc. I was Me and my brother were sons of two Irish immigrants who came during the Great Depression to Ellis Island. My father died when I was 4 years old. I watched him die. It was my first memory, um, unfortunately, in our apartment in the South Bronx, and was raised from that point on by my widowed mother, and went on to follow my brother's footpath and drop out of high school when I was 15 years old. And at that point, went on a journey, which has been a never-ending journey that keeps blowing my mind of all the things that I've been involved in and done. But it started, and I say I have 7 lifetimes so far, and I hopefully have a few more left. So I've had multiple identities. As a what I would say is a dropout ghetto kid in the South Bronx. Then I went on to become a radical and a revolutionary communist leader for about 10 years of my life, trying to overthrow the U.S. government. Then I got disillusioned and reevaluated my life after that period and rejected that belief system and moved in another direction, and then had to recreate myself and create a new identity, which I did. And I've worked probably about 30, 40, 50 different types of jobs in my life. And then at some point in my life, I got involved in motivational tapes and motivational books. And I ran into Tony Robbins and did a fire walk in New York, while at the time I was a postal worker working the midnight shift as a mail handler. And that flipped my life again. I quit the post office and went for my dreams, which took me, and I'm giving you the real short course, and that took me to Hollywood as an actor, which I never expected to do in my life. And I was acting in theater and film. Went to Hollywood. I was a counselor with runaway kids in Hollywood, in the streets of Hollywood. And at that point, moved from in front of the camera as an actor to behind the camera as a production manager, and then a line producer and a producer. And that led me on my Hollywood journey. And then it just keeps continuing.
Yeah, that's a pretty amazing journey. I mean, I know that, you recently finished two books for your memoirs, and there are two so far, but it sounds like there may be seven more in the pipeline just listening to some of the details of all the stories, because you could actually take each one of those, that conversation we had, and make an individual book out of each one. That's really something.
Well, there's a quote I use when I've done some motivational speaking, which is another thing I do. And one of the quotes I use is Helen Keller says, life's a great adventure or it's nothing at all. And I have definitely been given a great adventure because I feel like in some ways, almost Forrest Gumpish. I've been at so many places at so many times in history where how I got there it wasn't like part of my plan. I never planned to be in Hollywood. I never planned to be a producer. I never planned to be an actor. None of these things was thought out plans. It just doors opened up. I went through, recreated myself, and became what was necessary at that point in my life.
That's pretty fascinating. I was actually chatting yesterday with a young lady I'm helping with her memoir right this minute, and she actually had polio and taught herself how to walk again like 13 times. And the
Wow.
crazy thing about the whole story was she has kind of parallel life events in that way. And there's this amazing word in Greek, which is called kairos. And kairos means meeting the right people at the right time with the right connections to make the right things happen. And it sounds like that's happened for you, like time and time again in your life. And so let's, back up a little bit and let's talk about, going from the Bronx and dropping out, let's talk about your first few years after that. I mean, obviously, that was a really tough situation. You didn't really probably have everything planned out that you wanted to do and how you wanted to get there. When you found yourself in that position, where was your mind at? What were your next steps? What were you thinking?
Well, it was a combination of a lot of factors, and I think that word kairos
Uh-huh.
is
Yep,
that
that's exactly it.
sums it up really well. But when I dropped out of school at 15, my brother was 4 years older than me, so I was kind of following his footprint, so to speak. And in my neighborhood at that time, we were the only white ethnic kids in the neighborhood. The neighborhood had transformed, so most of all my friends were Puerto Rican and black, and so I was part of that community. And in part of being radicalized, there was a couple of things. I could have gone down certain paths. One path was the drug addiction path, and a lot of my friends unfortunately went down that path and became heroin addicts. Another path was gangs, and there was gangs in my neighborhood, and that was another path. And then there was the criminal life, which was also a big part of my neighborhood. So all those
Mhm.
negative paths were there. I didn't see any positive influences, and being a dropout, I didn't have any people who were success oriented or had that path. So I didn't see that path. Luckily, at that time, the radicals of the Black Panthers and a Puerto Rican version of them called the Young Boys started organizing in my neighborhood to change the conditions of poverty, to change the conditions of drugs, to change some of the negative things that were going on in that world. And so I gravitated towards that. I gravitated towards trying to make a positive change, and they seemed to be
Wow.
the path for me. So I wasn't able to join them because I was a white kid, but I was able to hang out with them and learn from them, and then begin to go on a journey where some of my ex-addict friends formed an organization to organize against drugs, and I joined that organization, and that started me down the path of organizing to get rid of heroin and drugs in the community, and organizing to improve the issues of poverty and all the other issues, racism and everything that was going on in the neighborhood. I got involved in that struggle, which opened up a door better than the doors that were other doors that were there, which was the negative doors.
Mhm. And what do you think is the primary thing? As a kid, it's always really tough with your friends around you and things like that influencing you in a negative way. What do you think was the primary thing that kept you out of that kind of trouble?
Well, it was probably a few different influences. One, my mother was a force of good. She was just
Mhm.
a very loving person, and she was like a mother to all the neighborhood kids. All the neighborhood kids came over to our house. We had in some cases, we were poorer than a lot of my friends because we
Mhm.
were living on two checks, Social Security check and a veterans check after my dad died. So we were poorer than a lot of my friends in the neighborhood, but my mother always fed all my friends. So they came over and they loved my mother. And so she was this, she had a third grade education. She was, religious, Catholic, and she just had a loving heart for everybody. And so that kind of gave me, I think that was the most positive influence in my life, to have a mother like that.
Mhm.
And that kind of took me in a path of wanting to do good as opposed to do bad. And then a lot of my friends, I also had a good group of friends that I hung with who we were into sports. We were into having fun together. We weren't into the negative. And then I
Wow.
started reading and learning. And even once I quit high school at 15, I went on a learning journey. Then I wanted to learn. When I was in school, I didn't want to learn. Once I got out of school, I wanted to learn everything. And I just went reading books, magazines, newspapers. I just went on a journey of growth that just has never stopped.
Wow. And that's really important. Do you feel like, having that influence kind of led you to the point that you really wanted to read and learn more, and that kind of helped you broaden your horizons, your mom's influence?
Well, my mom didn't read much. She listened to the radio. I mean, like I said, she had a third grade education. She read newspapers. She could read, but she wasn't like an educated woman.
Hmm.
Um, and it was more what was going on at the time. It was a wild time, the 60s. And so I started to want to figure it all out. And it took me, I went down every path. I read books on metaphysics. I read books on UFOs. I read books on, and then I
Wow.
started reading books on radicalism. And I read books from probably every author you can imagine. I read memoirs back in the day, Malcolm X's book, Richard Wright, Black Boy. And,
Wow.
my identity was I identified with my friends. I felt like I was part of them. So, and I became like a leader in the community, and they remind me of it to this day. I still have friends from the South Bronx, and they tell me, "You turned us on to this. You turned us on to that. You encouraged us to do this." And it's like I forgot all that. I'm like, really? I did that?
That's
But they
awesome.
always saw me as the guy who was like constantly trying to learn more and then share with them. And so I guess somewhere that became who I was then, and it's carried through my whole life.
Awesome. And of all of the books that you were reading at that time, what do you think was your favorite genre that you were reading? What was the best kind for you?
Well, book wise, I read everything. So I read um, memoirs like Malcolm X.
Mhm.
I read books on philosophy. I read books on ideology, Marxist economy. I read books from writers from Africa, writers from Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin, Mao, you
Wow.
name it. I read hundreds of books. Um, and I just love reading and I love learning.
Awesome.
And of course, later as I evolved out of it, a lot of what I read I now look back on and go, well, those ideas are not ideas that I agree with anymore, and I don't think they were right. But it helped me grow and progress. So I can't say it was bad because I was constantly learning, and I was always kind of like wanting to know more and
Mhm.
questioning. So I never gave up that questioning, and eventually, because I had that questioning, I questioned my own beliefs at the time, and saw that even though it seemed right, because we wanted utopia, we wanted to
Mhm.
build a utopia. It turned out that the people who were promoting those ideas were not about utopia, but they created a nightmare. And I saw that what communism achieved wasn't what it said, but it became, millions of people got killed under Stalin, under Mao, under
Mhm.
Pol Pot. I didn't know it at the time. At first, I thought it was they were trying to do good in the world. Uh, their intentions, who knows? But what they accomplished was not good. It was bad. It was evil. And it took me
Gotcha.
a while to get there to figure that out. But I just feel lucky and thankful. And I say, God, God got me to another place because I was
Absolutely.
open. I was open enough to reject the ideas that weren't positive, even though they were packaged in a fake positive covering.
I'll never forget the first time that I met you, which was many, 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 many moons ago. Our mutual friend Kurt told me that essentially the reason that I was going to love meeting you was that you embodied the American dream, that you had come from nothing, you had made yourself into, an amazing role in Hollywood, and that you had basically spent years sleeping on someone's couch while you were defining the American dream for yourself, and you were working at the Postal Service and working all these long hours. And he said, "You're going to love John. He's the hardest worker you're ever going to meet. He's the embodiment of the American dream. And in addition to that, he also is just full of light. You're just going to love him." And I said, "I can't wait to meet him. I was so excited to meet you when I finally did." And, what I want to ask you about now is, reflecting back on two things. Number one, first of all, I wanted to ask you if you feel like having had friends from so many different backgrounds and having read so much, if that really helped you to identify, with your common man and pretty much have friends across, every different group. Because one thing I'm also very much amazed at is, you were a part of the Black Panthers, and you have
Well,
had so many different friends from so many different backgrounds. I find that fascinating. And I'm wondering if it's because of number one, growing up in the Bronx, and if it's also number two, because you read so widely. That's just really fascinating.
Well, it's kind of funny because today I posted on a Facebook story a T-shirt or a jacket that says, "I may live in California, but I'll always be from the Bronx." And I posted
Nice.
Bronx Strong. And it's funny that you mentioned that because it is the Bronx. A lot of times people look at stuff and it all comes down to perspective. And you can say, well, I grew up in poverty. I grew up one of the worst neighborhoods in America. And that would seem like a bad thing. But to me, it was a good thing because I got to, like you said, I grew to understand and respect all people, and it gave me a gift. So that poverty was a gift to me, even though some people say, well, poverty a gift? Yeah, it was because it helped create the values that I had. And I always will identify with being from the South Bronx, and I'm proud of that. Um, and it gives me that sense of respect for all people of all races, of all backgrounds, so it's not like it took me a while to get to know because I didn't know any. Eventually, I got to know people who were successful both in business and financial. I didn't know those at first, and then I got to respect and like them as well. So I get along with people from every kind of background, whether they're homeless or they're wealthy. It doesn't matter to me. I judge them on their character and who they are, and that's a gift that I got from growing up in the Bronx. The reading is a gift too because I have they have a saying in sales, always be selling,
Yes.
always be closing. Excuse me, always be closing. And so I changed it to always be learning,
Nice.
because if you're learning, you never should stop learning. I mean, I say the day you stop learning is when there's 6 feet of dirt above you. But up until that point, there's just so much to learn, and there's so much to continue to grow. So whatever you think you only know a little. There's so much more that you can learn. Keep learning, keep expanding, keep growing. So those two things have shaped my life, I think, and will continue to shape it.
No, that's fantastic. And I think that that's really, really important. So, backing up to move forward, what would be your piece of advice to people who may be in a more remote area, for example, who don't have friends from all different walks of life? What would you recommend to them to become more worldly in terms of reading, in terms of meeting people from different backgrounds and things like that? Because, particularly now we're at such an odd time in our country, I think it's very important for everyone to see each other as brother and sister instead of seeing each other as, this group or that group or anything else because we're all Americans. What would you say, for example, would be a good thing for people who want to learn more about different cultures, who want to have friends from different backgrounds? What would your advice to them be?
Well, first, it's a decision to do that, and you're absolutely right. One of the challenges right now is that uh, there's a lot of forces in our society that instead of wanting to have us uh, respect and learn from each other, are dividing us. They're trying to divide us amongst so many different ways. And the reason they're doing that is a combination of profit for them and ideology for them.
Hmm.
But that is not just because people are trying to do it to you, don't mean you have to accept that thing. You have a choice and you have an ability to step above that. And I think there's so many ways nowadays. One is making a decision to get out of your bubble, to get out of your perspective of only being friends with people who agree with you. If you don't have the courage to be able to be friends with who disagree with you, you're a weak person, and that's not going to help you in life. You need to be a brave, courageous person. And part of being courageous is that if somebody disagrees with you, so what? Learn from it. Listen to them, talk to them, respect them, make friends. Make friends with people who disagree with you, not just people who agree with you. It's easy to make friends with people who agree with you, but it's harder to make friends with people who disagree. Do it anyway, and begin to reach out. There's so many ways you can do it through volunteering. There's an organization now that I'm been uh, invited to become an ambassador, and I'm an ambassador for, called Operation Gratitude. It's an
Awesome.
organization that provides care packages to the military troops, to their families, to veterans, to first responders, to healthcare workers. And it's a group made up of people across the political divide: Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Conservatives, you name it. They all are working on a common cause to help others and express gratitude. And that is a way that you can get outside your bubble and start to realize, what do we have in common as opposed to what do we have different? Because we're always going to have things different. So what?
Hmm.
Big deal. My family came from Ireland. They didn't come from another country. If they did, they would have had a different experience. That's life. We're all different people coming with different worlds. But where we come together is where we have strength.
No, and that's, really, really important, particularly right now. So thank you very much for sharing that. And then another question I wanted to ask you is kind of related to that whole hard work and endurance thing that we were just talking about, working, all night long in a mailroom, having whatever odd job you needed in order to pursue to make your dreams come true. I know one thing that, a lot of people are afraid of hard work. And I know that there's this really great Henry Ford quote, I think, that says, a lot of people see opportunity, but they run away from it because it shows up, disguised as hard work, I think is the gist of the quote. I know I didn't just nail it exactly, but I think that that does happen a lot of times. People are not willing to put their time, put their skin in the game, really kind of take that next step. So obviously that's something that you've done throughout your career over and over and over again. And it sounds like it's led you to some pretty amazing places. So what advice, number one, could you give to people who are not sure what direction to go and how to do that? And number two, I guess I would say, what are a few examples from your own life where that's knocked on your door, that opportunity has knocked on your door, looking like hard work, but it showed off and paid dividends?
Well, let me reverse to the second, and I'll try and come back to the first. Uh,
Sure.
one is, I some of it was by necessity. So when I came back to New York and got out of the movement that I was in to overthrow the U.S. government, I it's funny you even say it. I then, given who I am today, but then I had to scramble because I didn't have money. I grew up in poverty, so I never had money. That wasn't anything. So when I came back to New York, I had got my GED after I led a trip. I didn't mention this in the thing. I led a trip to China when I was 26 years old. I was still a high school dropout, and I was in China for 2 years meeting with the Chinese Communist Party. Stopped in Yugoslavia, met with the Yugoslavian Communist Party. Anyway, I came back to America. I got my GED, got my high school diploma, equivalency diploma, went to college, started my college journey, and eventually started in New York, went to Chicago, came back to New York, and I got my BA, and then I went on for a master's. So while I was working in the post office, the midnight shift, I was also going to school for my degree, and at the same time, I was also working another job, doing some oral history interviewing for a university. So I was like doing 2 or 3 jobs, and I was going to school, and I was sleeping like 2 or 3 hours a day. So I was hustling because I had to make money, I had to survive, but I also wanted to grow. I wanted to move forward, and it's not like I was a perfect person. At the same time, I was getting high, I was drinking too much, I was doing drugs, I was doing stupid stuff at that point too, and so I was kind of going in 2 directions at the same time, which ain't a good idea. And then that's when I met Tony Robbins. And once I did that fire walk that night, I mean, it flipped my life. I never did drugs ever again. It was over. Never again. And I didn't drink alcohol for over a year. It just like that flipped my life. And then I went on that side of me. I made a decision that side was gone. I was a new person, and I was going to go commit 100% to dreams and accomplish what I wanted to, and do whatever it took to get there. So that kind of opened up another path. And for people, it's just it's a mindset, it's a belief. When you believe something is possible and you're willing to put in the work, you'll get there. When you'll get there, who knows? How you'll get there, who knows? But if you're willing to make that decision, that decisive decision is, this is who you are. My identity is, I'm going to be somebody who is successful. I'm somebody who's going to make a contribution to the society and to life. Once you decide who you are, you then begin that journey towards that. And it doesn't immediately happen, but you move in the direction decisively. And it's not like, New Year's resolution. It's more like, this is me. It's like that thing, The Greatest Showman, that song, this is who I am. Once you decide who you really are or who you're going to become, from that point on, you commit to that. You commit, and you never change directions. And it's a powerful decision when you make that decision. That's who you're going to be. So that's what I did, and that's how I went on that journey.
Yeah, no, that's pretty amazing. And, let me ask you this as well. when, I think sometimes we don't really know, right? We don't really know exactly what it is that we want to pursue when we're moving in that direction. We might know, hey, I want to work in film, but you might not know, hey, I want to be a director. Hey, I want to be a producer. Hey, I want to work in front of the camera. I think that that kind of evolves. Do you feel like that's something that if people have an idea of what they want to do, they should just go and pursue that? Or do you think that it's more successful to define it before, like in advance? Like, should I say, for example, I want to be a screenwriter and a producer, but I never want to be an actor? Or do you think it's best for everyone to kind of try their hand a little bit at everything because they might not know what they actually like? What's your advice?
Uh, I don't. I think both. It depends on the person. We're all different people, and
Mhm.
it depends on who you are and what you are at the time. So some people know what they want to be. They know what their talents are. It's like, I love writing. I want to be a screenwriter. This
Mhm.
is what I've always wanted to do. Then go pursue it because you know that's what you want. There's
Of
others
course.
like myself who are like, I don't know. It's like, I want to be this. I want to be that. I want to be this. I don't know. And we don't have that one decision yet, that path. And so for people like me at that time, and for others who are similar, get in the game, get into the areas of where you're going to learn, and then you'll figure it out. But take action, get involved, and then and you can change, and there's nothing wrong with changing. So you start out like I did as an actor. Okay, that was fun. I loved it, and I taught acting, and I studied acting, and I did all that. And then I moved into a different position. It was like, oh, I can work behind the camera as a line producer, and this is more. I can control that and be more successful. So for me, that made a good sense because it was like I was older when I got into acting, and I did not want to sleep on people's floors for the rest of my life. So I was wanted to get a little bit more successful. So it opened up a different door. So each one of us has a different path, but the path is follow it, um, put your best into it, and learn. Just keep learning, and you'll find what you want to do. And if something's not what you wanted to do, all right, shift gears, pivot, do something else. Don't get stuck in that place if you don't like it. Move on, do something else.
I just know that I'm not meant to be an actor. I can't be an actor. I'm terrible with memorizing lines. I've tried. It does not work well for me. I've had, coaches on the sidelines mouthing the words to me that I'm supposed to be saying in several of the roles that I've taken on over the years. So I know what I'm not supposed to be doing. I'll just say that. And so
Well, here's the funny thing, Melissa. You know, um, me being an actor, B doing being a motivational speaker. The first time when I was about probably 17 years old, that I was in a group in the South Bronx. My friend invited me to this anti-drug group that I got involved and became a leader in. Um, I had to get up in front of the group and say my name and say why I was there. Well, I was so scared. I stuttered. I couldn't say my name right. I was in total panic. I was a shy kid. I was so shy. It was unbelievable. So, it blows my mind. I always say God clearly had a bigger plan for my life than I had because, when I think of that kid going motivational speaking, acting, are you freaking kidding me? No way in the world could that happen. But it did, and because I put myself out there in face of the fear. When the first time I did a play, I was shaking. My whole body was shaking. I was so scared. And after I did it, the second time it shook a little less. But
oh, yeah.
eventually it was like I loved it and I wasn't shaking anymore. So I kept going through the fear and going through that and not giving up. And then all of a sudden it became easy.
No, and I think that that's really the most important thing, right? It's just learning to jump right into the fire and lean into the fear because once you do, it isn't a fear anymore. And usually the adrenaline from the experience will keep you going, even if nothing else, and then you'll lean into it.
That's right.
I know
That's
that's
right.
the best way. I'm glad that
Yeah.
we agree on that.
Oh
So
yeah.
let's talk about Tony Robbins a little, and let's talk
Sure.
specifically about the influence that he had on your life, because obviously he is a huge success story. He's someone I think that most people, whether they're involved in the motivational community or not, everyone knows who Tony Robbins is. And so, what I'd like to ask you is, first of all, how did you meet Tony Robbins? And second of all, how did you start working with him? in the way you did, and how did that help you to really kind of turn things around? Because I think that's a really important kind of turning point in your entire story.
Well, I started to listen to motivational tapes, Wayne Dyer. Uh, there used to be a company called Nightingale Conan who used to put out motivational tapes. And before I worked in the post office for a couple of years, I was an aerobic instructor and a health club salesperson at Jack LaLanne. So during that
Nice.
time, my sales manager gave me all this motivational tapes to listen to. And at first I thought they were pretty hokey. And then I found myself really liking them and learning and growing. And so somewhere along the line, I heard about Tony Robbins. And when I was working in the post office, I saw this flyer that he was doing a firewalk seminar right down the street, 2 blocks away or 4 blocks away from my post office. And at the time, it was a little expensive, not super expensive, but I was like, I think I should try this out. I should check this out. This looks interesting in the next step in my journey. So I took the seminar. And, when I got there, I'm a New Yorker. I'm a Bronx kid. I was skeptical. Who's this guy? I never ran into a motivator in person before. And all the stuff he was running in the seminar was outside my comfort zone. Trust me.
Hmm.
And I was going, and part of me was like, what's the hype? What's the hustle? Is this guy for real? Is he authentic? And by the end of the time, I realized I trusted this dude. The dude was real. He wasn't fake. He came from a working class background himself, a tough background. He worked as a janitor. He came from the bottom, and that impressed me as well, because those stories impress me to this day, because
Hmm.
it's my story in a way. And so I like what he. And then the big thing was what happened in that seminar. Besides overcoming fear and walking on hot coals on 34th Street, which was mind-boggling on a Friday night, was the whole the mindset and the belief system that he offered if we wanted to take advantage of it, to take 100% responsibility for our life, to realize that we had power within us that we weren't using, we weren't accomplishing what we wanted because we weren't putting in the effort and the work. So all these ideas that he shared, just wow, they just blew my mind and just resonated for me. And I was like, yes, this is where I want to go. This is who I want to be. I want to be successful. I want to overcome my weaknesses and grow.
Hmm.
And so it gave me all that and took me on that path that continued. Later, I did some crewing. I worked on crew with him. I did probably a dozen firewalks in my life. Um, and it was the mindset and the ideas that the power was within you and you had an opportunity. You always had a choice for what you would do in life. You could choose to go left or right. You could choose to do drugs or not do drugs. You could choose to work harder to be successful. You always had a choice. And that never became given, that message was never given to me before in life so clearly. And I just said, yeah, I like this. Let me take this on. And that led me to, as far as me as a reader, I've probably read over 500 books in the motivational psychology, NLP, counseling, therapy, life coaching since that point to today. So it took me on another journey of growth and learning, which continues. So I'm grateful to him as my mentor. I'm lucky to have ran across him at that time to open up that door for me to go on that growth and learning process. And the other thing it's done is it's introduced me to a bunch of people who are some of my best friends in life now, who have kind of changed their lives. I know people who turned from selling drugs and working for the cartel to be successful businessmen because of Tony Robbins. I know people who ran the biggest motorcycle gang on the East Coast who, because of Tony Robbins, quit the gang and changed their life and became some of the most motivational, inspiring human beings that I've ever come across. I've just met so many people who just transformed themselves, took that message and said, damn it, I could do better with my life. I don't have to be a gangbanger. I don't have to be a drug dealer. I don't have to be in poverty. I can change my life, and did. And they went ahead to do it. And that to me is just, why wouldn't you? That's a message we all should be encouraging people to take. No matter where you start in life, you can still go somewhere else if you're willing to change your beliefs and your actions, and you'll do it.
Yeah, and that's something that, doesn't really seem to be a popular message that resonates quite as much as it should. A lot of people are really thinking about, how am I going to, I don't know, become the next influencer? How am I going to end up, getting this many followers? How am I going to end up making this much money because I want a Ferrari? And I guess my question to you would be, having been around the world, having, interacted with some of the most famous people, known some of the most amazing people. I know you've worked with people like Stallone, for example. I know that you've worked with just an amazing cast list over the years, and you've worked with the very powerful, you've worked with the very wealthy. What would your advice be to people in terms of understanding the value of that intrinsic belief system and finding what's important to them instead of just chasing the next flashy thing or the next Ferrari, for example? What would your advice be for people for defining their life parameters there?
Well, once again, we're all different, and I wouldn't judge people for whatever they're doing. But for me, and what I've learned is that, and the people that are part of my life, even more today than ever before, are people who a major part of their life is about service. And I think, one of the things I got from Tony Robbins also was to have this belief in gratitude, to live every day with gratitude. So that belief has changed my life. And I think no matter what you have or don't have, if you're in poverty, you can still be grateful because you still have things that other people don't have. So when you have that belief of gratitude, it makes every day a good day because you start out feeling grateful and then you do your best to make it better. So you may have a hard day, you may have all kinds of challenges going on, but gratitude gives you a gift. And so I got that gift. So that's a belief system. And then the best way to deal with gratitude is to get into service because then you not only feel grateful, but you're able to do something to help others given the gifts that you have. And so you get into sort of the people in my world who make service a big part of their life. It doesn't diminish making money or making financial success because that's good too. Because if you have financial success, then you have a ability to use that financial success to help others, to do more for others rather than just for yourself. If you're self-centered and it's all about you, well, I feel sorry. That's
Mhm.
what it is for you because that's not the best place to be, in my opinion. I think it's better to, create that success and use that success to help others, to help them raise up, to help them learn, to help them become successful, become a force for good. And if you become that force, you'll have a life of purpose and meaning, and you'll get back to that day when you look back on your life and you won't have regrets because you've not only been successful, but you've done good for people.
No, that's very, very important. Thank you very, very much for sharing that. That's super, super important there. And let's talk very quickly, because I know that, we're coming up on the top of the hour, and I know that this is going to be a part two because there's still so much to to discuss. So let's just briefly talk about, what was it about Hollywood, that drove you to want to go and chase your dream in Hollywood? What was it that inspired you? Was it something about old movies? Was it something about the American dream? What drove you that direction?
No, once again, for me, it was my life's been doors open and I go through, and then once
Uh-huh.
I go through, it opens up. So how did I get into acting? Was when I was going to school. I was going for my master's at City College in New York for creative writing. I went through studied other pieces, but I started gravitating towards creative writing mainly because I wanted to write my memoir. It's taken me a long time to get that memoir finished, Melissa, but I did. So I'm in the class, and then we had to get up and improv for writers. So I had to get up in front of the class and do an improvisation. Well, I was once again back to the shyness. Reverted back. I was afraid. I was shaking, and I'm like, oh my god. But after the class ended, my brain went, you got to get over this fear. You got
Hmm.
to not ever be afraid of this again. So how do you do that? Study acting. So I said, okay, I'm going to study acting. So I stepped into acting and I started studying it. And from that, I started to act. And next thing I know, I was in theater. And next thing I know, I was in film. And I love the acting process. I love the growth. and the challenge and the just that just you never knew what it was going to be, and it was always something you had to work on and learn. So I loved that process. So I started acting, and then acting, I did films. I did a bunch of films. They made me play bad guys. They said I looked like a bad guy. I had a mustache and a goatee at the time. I did look rather
Oh,
scary.
okay. I was about to say, you look like a bad guy. What on
Yeah, no,
earth?
they said we actually filmed in a prison in New Jersey, and the warden said to me, he said, "You look scarier than most of these prisoners in the jail."
Oh,
So,
wow.
but so acting became fun, and then but that was the problem with acting is it's hard to succeed at financially. It's hard to you spend a lot of time auditioning, which was cool, but I needed to also succeed financially because I had no money. I mean no money. Um, so when the opportunity opened up, when my buddy offered me to work with him on some rap videos as his production manager behind the camera, I stepped to it, and that opened up another journey. And then I got good at that because a lot of the skills in what I do, producing and line producing, is being able people dealing with people, and I love people, and I'm able to work with people on any level. And so that gave me use my talents and gifts I could use in this venue and still move forward. So that's what I did.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really important. And I think that, people don't realize, particularly when it comes to production work, how important it is to have really great people skills because, there's nothing worse than a producer or director who doesn't like people because you can just see it all over their face. It's not a good experience. So, what would be your advice to someone if they were thinking about, being a producer or a director? Do you think it's necessary to like people? And what if they are not big fans of people in general? What would be your advice?
Well, not all of them are, unfortunately. But I try and simplify it down to about two or three things. One is that treating people the way you want to be treated.
Mhm.
Obviously, something from the Bible, but it's a real simple philosophy that if you go forward, always treating people the way you want to be treated, life's going to be good. Than if you don't. And
Oh, yeah.
so I always do that. The first thing I do in anything I do with people I don't know is I find a way to make them my friend. So I start with trying to build rapport, and I try to make them my friend. I want to find out about their life. I want to find out about their family. I want to find out about their visions and their goals. And I want a friend. I want somebody to be my friend before we start business, before I start asking for anything, before I start. I'm trying to create a friend because with a friend we can achieve much more than if we're just not friends. So I start there. Then I have a belief that there's always a solution to every problem, and that's
Oh, yeah.
something I learned over the years. So in my position, it's very crucial because a lot of times people give up when there's problems or they get bent out of shape psychologically. When I go, yeah, of course there's problems. There's going to always be problems, and that's not a bad thing. My goal is to overcome the problems. That's what we're here for. So when life throws problems, we come up with solutions. Thank you. Thanks for the problem. Here's the solution. And that attitude allows you to calmly solve whatever gets thrown at you by life, by in a film, whatever it is. And that's the second one. And then the third one I have is no matter what it is, to have an unstoppable mindset, to just realize that you just won't get stopped. You'll find a way no matter what. You don't give up. You don't quit. You find a way. Whatever it takes, you find a way. And you do it together with people as your team. Because I don't have all the answers. I'm not brilliant about everything. A lot of people know more about everything than I do. And I reach out to them for information and I use that information to solve the problem because I don't know everything about cameras. I don't know everything about whatever. Um, but I know how to get the answers by asking good questions and using that to make good decisions. And then you make the decision and you move forward.
Yeah, you just brought up another Henry Ford quote actually, which is pretty awesome. And Henry Ford's quote was something, and again, I should look this up beforehand, but you just echoed it back, and it's something like, "I know I'm not the smartest person, but I know how to hire them." So, always recognizing that you're not going to be an expert at everything, but knowing who to call in when it's time to know who to call. Well,
And the other thing I would just, as we're coming to close too, and
mhm.
I know we'll come back. The other thing I would say, it's really great if you could find a way. And for some people, this is harder than others, but it hasn't been hard for me because of my mother. But is be humble. Be humble because if you're humble, you're open to learning. You're open to growing from people who know more than you. If you're not humble and you think you know everything, well, the bad news is you don't. And you really don't know everything. You just think you do. But if you realize that you don't, then you're able to learn and you're able to solve things because you have that humility and that humbleness. And if you bring that into the picture, it's a gift. You have another strength, another superpower. And I think humility and humbleness is a superpower, and more people need to find it.
I think that that's a book you need to write, John. I absolutely do. Just saying.
I think you've already given me 6 more books. Thanks, Melissa.
Well, John, it's been amazing chatting with you today. Thank you so much. And you and I will schedule the second part of this. And I know I'm going to have to send you a ton of questions in advance because I still have so many more things I want to ask about. So thank you so much for your time today.
Hey, thank you so much, and thank you for taking the time to create this for me, and thank you for all the work you're doing, moving me forward with my 2 books and getting those to the point where hopefully we'll get a chance to give people something else to read too.
Sounds great. So excited to help and chat with you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very